In this video, I'll show you August 28, 2020, Officer Matthew Jorgens of the Pequot Lakes Police Department and Officer Matthew Thompson of the Nisswa Police Department were conducting a traffic stop in Crow Wing County, Minnesota, when Nisswa Mayor Frederick Heidman began recording the traffic stop from across the street, then crossed the four-lane highway with his dog and approached the officers on foot. The interaction that followed was captured on Officer Thompson's body camera.
What's up?
We're just looking at this guy over here.
Anything exciting on anything?
I just added them in.
Probation or warrants? Or...
Haven't seen anything yet.
Check it
But
out.
you got the mayor over here. You got our mayor over here gawking at us.
Oh, yeah.
You guys can hop back in the car.
Yeah.
All right.
You want to just stand back over there?
What are you guys doing?
Just stand back over there.
What are you guys doing?
We're stopping cars.
For what?
I don't know why we were stopping him, but he was the one that I just got here. Okay.
You guys are emptying his car out on the road.
Okay.
What the hell are you guys up to?
Just go stand back over there.
Don't you guys have something better to do, like patrol?
Go stand back over there.
You
Okay.
know what?
This isn't
I am
safe
the
for you.
I'm the mayor of this town, and you guys get the hell off the highway out here.
Talk to our TZD coordinator if you don't like what we're doing. This is what we're doing tonight, okay?
You guys.
All right.
Just
You're
go
a bunch
stand.
of-
Just go stand back over there. Go stand back over there.
Go do your jobs. You're not drug people. You're not even qualified to be pulling people over for this.
Okay, well, you didn't even know that, so go stand back over there. You can videotape all you want. Just go stand back over where it's safe, okay?
You're not in a safe area. I've almost got...
Oh, don't tell me. I know what the I'm doing.
And now your dog's loose.
Yeah, well, if you guys wouldn't be pulling people over, I wouldn't.
Officer Thompson tells Mayor Heidman that he can continue to film the traffic stop, but orders him to stand back a safe distance. The Eighth Circuit has not ruled on whether there is a constitutionally protected right to film police officers performing their duties in public. Nonetheless, the circuit courts that have considered the issue have determined that such recording is protected by the First Amendment. And in the 1972 case of Channel 10, Inc. versus Gunnarsson, the U.S. District Court for the District of Minnesota determined that police interference with television reporters filming of a public crime scene violated the First Amendment when there was no indication that the reporter was in a so-called improper place, reasoning that, quote, "It seems clear that employees of the news media have a right to be in public places and on public property to gather information, photographically or otherwise." As the First Circuit Court of Appeals pointed out in the 2011 case of Glick versus Cuniff, where it recognized the First Amendment right to videotape police carrying out their duties in public, it generally does not matter for First Amendment purposes whether the person recording the event is a private individual or a reporter, as now quoting the First Amendment right to gather news is not one that inures solely to the benefit of the news media. Rather, the public's right of access to information is coextensive with that of the press. Accordingly, it is highly likely that a court would conclude that Mayor Heidman had a First Amendment right to record the traffic stop. However, as the First Circuit noted in the Glick case, quote, "The right to film is not without limitations. It may be subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions." The First Circuit explored this issue more deeply in the 2014 case of Garrick versus Begin, where it confirmed that the right to film applied at traffic stops, but then clarified that, quote, "This is not to say, however, that an individual's exercise of the right to film a traffic stop cannot be limited. Traffic stops may be especially fraught with danger to police officers and thus justify more invasive police action than would be permitted in other settings." The court further stated that, quote, "The circumstances of some traffic stops, particularly when the detained individual armed might justify a safety measure, for example, a command that bystanders disperse that would incidentally impact an individual's exercise of the First Amendment right to film. Such an order, even when directed at a person who is filming, may be appropriate for legitimate safety reasons. However, a police order that is specifically directed at the First Amendment right to film police performing their duties in public may be constitutionally imposed only if the officer can reasonably conclude that the filming itself is interfering or is about to interfere with his duties. Here, the officers specifically informed Mayor Heidman that he could continue to film, but asked him to step back to a safer distance where he would be out of the way of the traffic stop. As such, a court would likely conclude that the officers did not interfere with Mayor Heidman's First Amendment right to film the encounter.
You guys are a disgrace. You know, you'd think up in this area we'd have some decent cops. You're as bad as the dinks down in Minneapolis.
All right,
Whatever you say.
Oh, shut the up. Stuff going on.
Thought I'd tell someone.
All right.
Appreciate it, man.
Sounds good. Yep, no problem. 406, 100, can you send us another car?
Yeah, fine. Back now.
This is going to be fun, guys.
Yep. Just because you're the mayor, it doesn't give you the right to disobey a direct law enforcement order. You're impeding my investigation.
I've had no warning.
move along.
Yes, you have. We've told you many times.
You've never told me.
We both told you.
Properly gap these cups.
After Mayor Heidman returns to the traffic stop in violation of the order to stand away at a safe distance, the officers place him under arrest, claiming that he is impeding their investigation under Section 609.50 of the Minnesota statutes, which defines the offense of obstructing legal process. It is a crime when an individual intentionally, now quoting, obstructs, hinders, or prevents the lawful execution of any legal process. Civil or criminal or apprehension of another on a charge or conviction of a criminal offense or now quoting again, obstructs, resists, or interferes with a peace officer while the officer is engaged in the performance of official duties. In the 1998 case of State v. Kroski, the Supreme Court of Minnesota clarified that statute, quote, is directed at a particular kind of physical act, namely, physically obstructing or interfering with an officer, and that now, quoting again, physically obstructing or interfering with a police officer involves not merely interrupting an officer, but substantially frustrating or hindering the officer in the performance of his duties. The court also stated that, quote, the statute does not apply to ordinary verbal criticism directed at a police officer even while the officer is performing his official duties, and does not apply to the mere act of interrupting an officer even intentionally. However, the court concluded that the statute could be used to punish so-called fighting words or any other words that have the effect of physically obstructing or interfering with a police officer in the performance of his duties, giving the example that the statute may be used to punish a citizen who ran beside an officer pursuing a criminal in a public saint, shouting and cursing at the officer. Now quoting if the shouting and cursing physically obstructs the officer's pursuit, and if the person intends by his conduct to obstruct or interfere with the officer. Applying this precedent in the 1998 case of State v. Okino, the Minnesota Court of Appeals upheld an obstruction conviction against an individual who engaged in disruptive behavior and refused to leave a police station when an officer repeatedly asked him to do so. In affirming the conviction, the court concluded that the defendant intentionally ignored the officer's request to stop interrupting her, and that the jury reasonably concluded the defendant's intentional repeated verbal interruptions exceeded ordinary verbal criticism of the police and rose to the unlawful level in which his words had the effect of physically interfering with the officer's performance of her official duties. Additionally, the U.S. District Court for the District of Minnesota determined in the 2014 case of Grahams v. Dewson that a reasonable police officer could have determined that there was probable cause to arrest an individual for violating this statute when they failed to comply with a lawful order. As such, it is possible that a court would conclude that Mayor Heidman's repeated interruptions of the traffic stop and his return to the traffic stop after being told to stand back constituted a violation of the obstruction statute, or, at the very least, that the officers had the probable cause necessary to arrest him.
Never warned me. Don't.
Yes, we did.
When?
The first time you came up here, you started talking to us with your cell phone in hand. We told you could videotape us from a safe spot, and you never moved. And then you come back here, and then you do it again.
You guys are just creating more problems. You're going to be in the paper. You're going to be the cops just like all over the big city. You guys just really don't even understand what you're doing, do you?
We told you many times.
You didn't tell me many times. Hey, be nice.
Stop pulling away and stop resisting.
You're the one pulling.
Question for you. Have you had anything to drink today?
Nope.
When was the last time you drank?
Long time.
Long time?
Yeah.
Like when? Like earlier today or?
A week or two ago.
A week or two ago was the last time you drank? So if I ran you through a field sobriety test, you would pass?
Let's just go do a blood test. Well, that's the most accurate, so let's do that. Because for the record, I want to prove that there's no alcohol in the system.
Okay.
Okay, so
Well, if you know there's no alcohol in your system, then...
well, let's go then. It's all part of the record.
He's like, well, I want to do a blood test. I'm like, well, why do you want to do a blood test? Like, because it's the most accurate. All I mean, I don't know. He just smells like he's been sweating all day and stuff, so I don't smell any alcohol. He came up on foot with his dog and he was videotaping us, and we warned him many times to go somewhere else where it was safe and stuff, but he was like on the fog line and pretty much causing a scene and obstructing traffic. Jorgens had a car stopped. He was getting ready to kick him loose, and then, Fred comes up to us and starts yelling at the driver, and eventually Jorgens put Fred in handcuffs. So I guess right now we're just checking to see if the jail will take him, which I don't think so, but yeah, I would probably charge him with obstruction in D.C. So just...
Officer Thompson states that Mayor Heidman will be charged with obstruction in D.C., which is short for disorderly conduct. Section 6. 09.72 of the Minnesota statute states that disorderly conduct occurs when an individual, quote, engages in offensive, obscene, abusive, boisterous, or noisy conduct or inoffensive, obscene, or abusive language tending reasonably to arouse alarm, anger, or resentment in others if the individual knows or has reasonable grounds to know that it will tend to alarm, anger, or disturb others, or provoke an assault or breach of the peace. Although the Supreme Court held in the landmark 1971 case of Cohen v. California that profanity is protected by the First Amendment, in the 1942 case of Chaplinsky v. New Hampshire, the Supreme Court determined that so-called fighting words were not protected speech. As the Supreme Court of Minnesota explained in the 1978 case of Matter of Welfare of SLJ, offensive speech statutes. Therefore, constitutional only if criminal prosecution is permitted solely for fighting words, which the Supreme Court has defined as, quote, those personally abusive epithets, which, when addressed to the ordinary citizen, are, as a matter of common knowledge, inherently likely to provoke violent reaction, or now quoting again words which by their very utterance inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace. Accordingly, the court determined in the SLJ case that the Minnesota disorderly conduct statute must be narrowly construed to refer only to fighting words, and ultimately concluded that a profane statement directed at police officers by a 14-year-old child who was 15 to 30 feet away from them was not punishable fighting words under the specific circumstances of the case. Nonetheless, the Minnesota Court of Appeals clarified in the 1986 case of State v. Ackerman that the same profane statement could rise to the level of fighting words under different circumstances, such as when the speaker was face-to-face with the officer they were insulting, concluding that now quoting obscenities direct at a police officer may constitute disorderly conduct under certain circumstances, and that now quoting again, while it is obvious that not abusive epithet directed toward police officers would be sufficiently disturbing or provocative to justify arrest for disorderly conduct, there is no sound reason why officers must be subjected to indignities that go far beyond what any other citizen might reasonably be expected to endure. On the other hand, in the 2019 case of Torre Raja v. City of Fort Smith, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over Minnesota, held that an individual so-called profane shout at an officer was protected by the First Amendment, stating that, quote, with limited exceptions not relevant here, even profanity is protected speech. Criticism of law enforcement officers, even with profanity, is protected speech. However, as the Minnesota Court of Appeals explained in the 2006 case of In Re Welfare of TLS, quote, Although the disorderly conduct statute prohibits only fighting words as applied to speech content, the disorderly of otherwise protected speech or engaging in other so-called boisterous or noisy conduct may still trigger punishment under the statute without offending the First Amendment. In that circumstance, it is not the speech itself that triggers punishment. The statute may be applied to punish the manner of delivery of speech when the disorderly nature of the speech does not depend on its content. Based on this standard, the court determined that officers had probable cause to arrest a juvenile for disorderly conduct for disrupting a school by, quote, quote, shrieking. Humanities inside a school administration office, even though the content of her speech did not rise to the level of fighting words. Therefore, although Mayor Heidman would have a strong argument that the content of his speech was protected, he could still potentially be convicted of disorderly conduct based on the manner of his delivery.
He came up to us. He was on the side of the road over there videotaping us, and all of a sudden he gets closer and closer. Next thing you know, he's back behind my squad, videotaping us, starts cussing us out. And then he left, and then he gets in his car, comes back over here, parks right there, and starts yelling at Jorgens, his driver, in a stop. And now we're just seeing if jail will take him for DC obstruction, which I hope so.
Mayor Heidman was cited for obstruction of legal process and disorderly conduct and released at the scene. The obstruction charge was later dismissed, and on March 29, 2023, a jury found Mayor Heidman guilty of disorderly conduct. Mayor Heidman was sentenced to pay a $285 fine, but on June 9, 2023, he appealed his conviction to the Minnesota Court of Appeals. And as of the date of writing this episode, Mayor Heidman's appeal is still pending. After the incident, Mayor Heidman released a written statement explaining his actions in the statement. Mayor Heidman claimed that he was concerned when he saw Officer Jorgens digging around in the car and going through the occupants as personal belongings, and was worried about the impression the search was making with other tourists driving by. Mayor Heidman also stated that he planned to fight any charges resulting from the incident on free speech grounds. Additionally, at a city council meeting held on September 16, 2020, less than a month after his arrest, Mayor Heidman leveled unrelated misconduct allegations against the Nisswa Police Department, including accusations that Police Chief Greg Taylor had threatened Mayor Heidman and others. Following Mayor Heidman's arrest, the Nisswa City Council voted to censure him, formally request his resignation, and remove him from all internal committees for the remainder of his term. Mayor Heidman refused to resign, but when he ran for re-election on November 3, 2020, he lost to former Nisswa City Council member John Ryan, who received 1,171 votes while Mayor Heidman received 182 votes. Overall, Officer Jorgens and Officer Thompson get an A for remaining patient and respectful when dealing with Mayor Heidman and his abusive language, honoring Mayor Heidman's right to film the traffic stop while still attempting to keep all parties involved safe, and refusing to be intimidated by Mayor Heidman's political position to ensure that justice was dispensed evenly. The officers maintained professional demeanors as he yelled profanities at them, giving Mayor Heidman several opportunities to stand back from the traffic stop and film. Rather than retaliate against Mayor Heidman for his disrespectful but protected speech, the officers only resorted to arresting the mayor after he ignored their orders to stand a safe distance back from the traffic stop. In previous encounters we have reviewed on this channel, we have seen multiple officers arrest individuals for speech that was far less inflammatory than the insults Mayor Heidman directed at these officers, and Officer Jorgens and Officer Thompson deserve recognition for their restraint. Former Mayor Heidman gets an F for maintaining a belligerent and unprofessional demeanor throughout the encounter, ignoring officer instructions to stand back from the traffic stop, and berating and verbally attacking Officer Jorgens and Officer Thompson for simply doing their jobs. It seems that the officers had discovered marijuana during the traffic stop, which is why Mayor Heidman saw them going through the citizens' belongings. And although I cannot speak to the legality of all of their conduct during the traffic stop without seeing it for myself, neither could Mayor Heidman when he approached the traffic stop. While Mayor Heidman was certainly entitled to disagree with the officer's actions or the department's policies and procedures for searching vehicles, he should have attempted to effect change through political action rather than berating two police officers involved in a traffic stop on the side of the road. While I believe that all of his speech was protected by the First Amendment, his conduct in repeatedly interfering with the traffic stop certainly was not, and although Mayor Heidman was within his constitutional rights to say what he did, he certainly did not behave. Thank you very much for watching the video. Subscribe our channel for next video.